Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, How Manufacturers Can Leverage on Transparency and Simplicity with Business Central. My name is Martin Karlovic, and I'm the host for today's webinar. During the course of this webinar, of course, like when all the webinars, you're muted, but I'm still, although you're muted, and this is just for organizational reasons, I'm very much interested in having a conversation with you guys. So if you have a question, then please use the GoToWebinar chat pane to ask a question. When I'm on PowerPoint slides, I will see the question, or I will get a pop-up that you had a question, and then I will most likely answer it right away. If I'm doing a demo, and I will do a couple of demos in this webinar, then I won't see this pop-up message. Then I kindly ask you to be patient until I finished with the demo, and I will answer the question then, or I will answer it at the end of this webinar. If there are questions that remain unanswered, then I will definitely send you an email afterwards. If you have a question that comes to you after the webinar, then please send me an email and I will answer every email that I get, or connect with me on LinkedIn and send me a message there. And I'm quite active there, so I will respond there as well. Besides having questions on the webinar that I give today, if you have any idea how we as a company can do better, how I as a person can do better, or how we can make our products better, then also please let me know. I'm really interested in this. And last but not least, because today's webinar is on manufacturing, I just want to let you know that I host a regular podcast on Business Central and manufacturing, which is called the Business Central Manufacturing Show. And I'm curious to talk to everybody who has to say something about business central and manufacturing. So if you feel you have something to share, if you're a customer with a lot of experience, or if you're a partner who has taken a couple of customers live on business central and manufacturing, then please reach out to me and then we meet for a podcast session and I will ask a couple of stupid questions and be very happy to hear your very intelligent and interesting answers. And so with this, let's go to the purpose of today's webinar. And this webinar is all about how manufacturers can leverage on transparency and simplicity with Business Central. So we actually have two words in this title that I wanted to emphasize more in this webinar. This is transparency on the one hand and simplicity on the other hand. And I structured my presentation and also the demo that I will give around these two words, with an emphasis on transparency, but I will also talk about simplicity at the end of this meeting. And for all those of you who do not know us or who are not so familiar with our products, then we actually have two extensions for Business Central that help with transparency and simplicity when it comes to Business Central manufacturing. And these products are called VPS and VAPS. VPS stands for Visual Production Scheduler, and VAPS stands for Visual Advanced Production Scheduler. And this is the bigger brother of the VPS. So I will come to these products in a minute, but when we look at how actually a product like the VPS, a visual production scheduler, can help you to leverage on transparency with Business Central, then a visual scheduling product can help you actually in 4 areas. And although you see these 4 areas are kind of connected with each other, I don't have any arrows that indicate like a circle, because I think that 4 areas have its own right to exist and 4 areas are dependent on each other, and the one area can influence the other, but there is no like clear direction. You need to do this first, then this, but it can be that you using Business Central already, you start with scheduling, then you change your setup, you learn again, and so on and so forth. But overall, if you gain transparency of your Business Central manufacturing system, and if you gain transparency of your Business Central manufacturing data, then this transparency can help you to leverage and to improve your setting, the way of how you set up Business Central, the way of how you learn Business Central if you're new to Business Central, or learn or deepen your knowledge about Business Central. You can leverage transparency when you use Business Central, and of course you can leverage the transparency brought by a visual product when you schedule with Business Central. And with this like framework of where sources for transparency are when you deal with a visual scheduling product, let's talk about how to leverage on transparency while setting up Business Central. And let's recap. I mentioned the two products before, the VAPS and the VPS, and I will start with the VPS because like this is the visual foundation of what we do for manufacturing and for gaining transparency. And then once this ground is set, then I will also look at the more advanced product and how this can help, especially from my point of view, when it comes to simplicity, by the way. So when it comes to transparency, the VPS can actually give you a couple of tools and a couple of helps in terms of setting up Business Central, learning Business Central, using Business Central, and scheduling with Business Central. Because the VPS is the drag and drop front end to standard Business Central manufacturing. And this is the next sentence is a sentence I say in every VPS presentation. With the VPS, you can do what you can do with Business Central manufacturing, not more and not less. The VPS is Business Central manufacturing plain vanilla, Business Central manufacturing standard. This is the VPS, and the VPS is just the visual front end to what you get as out of the box manufacturing functionalities within Business Central. Hence, the VPS makes Business Central manufacturing visual. And this is a very, very important point. The visual production scheduler is not only about scheduling, but the visual production scheduler is likewise and with the same emphasis on the visualization. It makes your ERP system in its manufacturing part visible. It makes the master data visible, and it makes the transactional data visible. And with this, if you really think about this, what this means that you have a tool that makes master data and transactional data within the manufacturing capabilities of business. If you make these type of data visible and visual with the tool, visual and visible, then I think there is a very, very logic resulting recommendation, and this is a logical consequence. And of course I'm saying this in order to sell the VPS, but I'm also saying this because I'm fundamentally convinced that it is the right thing that you install the VPS before you set up Business Central manufacturing. So I've experienced a lot of cases with customers and partners in the last 24 months who came to me and said, now we are running on Business Central manufacturing. We want to do the next step. And in Business Central manufacturing now, we want to do some visual planning. We need a graphical planning board. We want to have whatever. We want to have a scheduling system for Business Central. Now we set it up and now we want to do it like we do the next step. And for me, this approach still is good because at some point of time, people decide to go for scheduling. But if you want to do it right, then my recommendation is install the VPS first. Before you go into a manufacturing project or before you take manufacturing live, install the VPS. And then start to set up Business Central. Set up things, set up items, set up routing, set up bombs, set up all these things that are essential to run manufacturing Business Central. But while you set them up, look at them in the VPS, and from looking at it, understand what you just set up. And in that way, in the face of going live or in the face of setting up Business Central manufacturing, do not use the VPS for scheduling. Don't move around operations. Don't make changes to the routing. Don't schedule with the VPS, but use it as a tool to make those things that you currently define and those things that you set up in Business Central use the VPS to make those things visible, to see them and to understand what you're setting up. And I think this is a very, very crucial part. And oftentimes I see all things being set up, and then when they come with the VPS, and then we look at the things and say, "Ooh, okay, yeah, I understand why you set it up like this, but you know, when you set it up like this, you were thinking about costing and you were thinking about reporting, but maybe you were not thinking about scheduling." And then customers go back to square one, and then they have to set up master data again and make them right for scheduling. So with the VPS, you can really make those things that you set up visible, and you can assess what you're setting up, if this would work in a scale if this would work with some scheduling requirements that you have or not. And if you don't do this, you to a certain degree fly blind. Uh, You fly blind, especially when it comes to kind of scheduling requirements, and then you start scheduling and you recognize, oh, because I flew blind, I set up things in a not so ideal way. And examples where you can actually gain transparency by using the visual production scheduler just as a visualization tool is to get clarity on the question, hey, will I use work centers and machine centers, or work centers only? Just set it up and then look at this. And when you see just your work centers with all the machine centers below there in a visual tool, and you just see it, then you will know, okay, hey, well, actually, this is getting too granular for me. I'm okay to stay on work center level. Or if you just set it up on work center level, then you might recognize, oh wow, but actually I need to schedule it down on machine center level. And now seeing it just those work centers, well, I understand that in some areas I should add some machine centers because they are important to me, because certain machine centers may be your bottlenecks. Or setting up routings. How granular do you need to want to set them up in the first go, in the second go, in the third go? And how detailed must the routing be in order to facilitate all the needs that routing have? And I know that the routings need to be very detailed for costing purposes. They might need to be detailed for execution purposes. They can be less granular for scheduling. So what is the purpose of your routing? Do you want to optimize them for costing, for work instruction, for scheduling, for reporting, for whatever? Or will you go for a compromised approach when you see alternatives to these routings? On machine centers, on work centers, you can set up efficiency. Do this, play around with this, see when you use efficiency, what this does to your capacity and what this then does to the length of your production orders on the schedule. And I see customers using the efficiency to kind of have a reduced efficiency because they say, well, on average, we just achieve this workload per day or whatever. You can do this, but also you can think of achieving the same by adding some slack into the routing. So if the things typically, if your routing says, okay, I get this done in 5 minutes, but you say, well, you know, I don't manage to get 12 pieces done in an hour, but I only get in realistically on average, I get only 10 pieces done in an hour. Well, then you could have X% of capacity on the machine center and the work center setting, or you can say, okay, well, the routing will not take 5 minutes, but it will 6 minutes. So then you add those like slack or a bit of buffer in your routing. Or if you have multiple stack routing, I mean, you can create and achieve something similar with the queue time, which you put on the machine center. So there are options of setting this up, and I bet that everybody understands in the end these options by thinking about it, by talking about it, by reading about it, but you understand them faster by just setting it up and then looking at the visual tool. Hey, what does this do to my schedule? What does this do to my data if I set it up like this or like that or like that? If you have multi-level bombs, you can use make to stock production or make to order, and this has certain impacts on how the productions are structured, how you have reservations from your sub-assembly to the final product and stuff like this. build this once and then look at it and see what resonates best with your expectations. Then we have simulated production orders. Do you want to use them? What's the advantage? What's the disadvantage? Or do you want to use planned production orders instead? And once you have a simulated production order, planned production order, and look at this in a tool like the VPS, then you will see what is most likely better for us. And I will not demo all of these. These were just examples where I feel that having a visual front end to what you set up here will help you decide best of how you should set it up. And I will not run through all the details, but we will look actually at options on how you can set up a routing and what impact the setup of the routing has on your schedule. And this is like the thing that I would like to look at first now. So now I'm here in my business center and I have set up a routing that I call, this is a 5-step routing. So in the end, it's 7 steps. So we will do some drilling, we will do some milling, some turning, some sawing, some welding, and then it goes to quality control and to assembly and quality control. Okay, so typically, this is a 5-step manufacturing process with 2, let's say, overhead processes afterwards. So it's drilling, milling, turning, sawing, welding, and then assembly, quality control. Pretty straightforward, actually. So in not seldomly, we meet customers who have these type of 5 manufacturing processes and then maybe 2 overhead processes at the end, and they have something like this. And then you look at the visual scheduler or you look at their routings, and then you see that they set it up in a way to either that the routings are set up to optimize for costing purposes, or that the routings are set up to kind of provide very detailed work instruction to the workforce who, once the production order is in a system, get whatever, a printed document, a work traveler from the routing, so that you release the production order, then you print the production order, and then there is this work traveler, these work order instructions, and they consist of the routing, and the routing includes a lot of work instructions. So the routing could look like this for these 5 steps plus some overhead steps. And I made it quite extensive in the very beginning, and then I got lazy and did it straightforward at the end. But we from time to time see that oftentimes a routing starts, and this is a sequential routing with one step following the others. So sometimes we even see that we have a separate routing step for setting up the machine. Then all times are 0, but there is some setup time. And then we get work instructions. Okay, now we are on the drill, take the 0.5-inch diameter and blah, 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 do this. And then there is more work instruction. And they have no times to it. It's just work instruction so that we have a very strong work traveler. And then it goes to drilling, or make sure you clean and then we drill it. Like you set it up, you have some work instruction, you drill it. Then next step is on the milling machine. Make sure you clean it, and there are more work instruction. And then you mill it. And here I have already set up time and runtime in one line. Then there is again work instruction for turning, and so on and so forth. So we oftentimes see routings like this, and they get quite complicated. And there is a value to this, because now here you can make, when you post, you can make a separate booking here on the setup time, and on the runtime you have clear instruction for your workforce. So there is a lot of advantages for doing it like this. But a similar routing for these kind of processes could also look like this, right? 7 steps, 5 steps in machining, and 2 steps for the overhead work at the end, with some setup times on the machines and some runtimes on the machines, and just runtimes on these, let's say, overhead steps. And both ways are like setting up production orders, right? And now I have actually in my system, I have planned production orders. I have 2 production orders where I applied those routings, and now this is the production order 233 and the 235, and both are planned. So we now can look, and I create production orders, and now we can look in the visual production scheduler, and I first will just look at the production order with the granular routing, right? Now I want to look at this, how this looks like. So now here is, and maybe we start from here. This is the visual production schedule. I now just loaded this one production order, and I look at this graphically, then the production order looks like this. I have all these steps, they are all shown to me, and you see I have some setting up in the beginning, then I see all those work instructions, and then it's drilling, I get more work instruction, it's milling, and so on and so forth. And if you set it up like this, that you have set up and the production, like I have it here in drilling, remember the routing is, and this is also the beauty of the VPS, you can just jump back and forth from the visual front end to business centered. So remember, I set it up in a way that you set up the drill first with some setup time, no runtime, work instruction, and then you do the drilling. If you do it like this, you can easily do something like this, where you say, okay, well, I need to move stuff out, and then you have a gap between the setup and the actual work that are doing. So I would say if you see this, you will know that you should do it like this, where and if we now go to the capacity view and say, well, let me show setup time, that you see, okay, I see the part of the setup time and then the production time. But if I move this thing for whatever reason, then setup time and the runtime always remains the same. But still here, this is now looking very complex, although this is just 7 steps, and this is complex because I have all those work instructions in between. So if I just exit the visual production scheduler, come in again into this view and now see all my production orders, then I have 2 production orders that have, like, they produce the same items, but I set up the routing in a different way, and those are, you see, I have a quite heavy schedule actually, and I have those 2 planned production orders. I have this one here, which is the complex one that we looked at, and there is this one here. It is just drilling, milling, turning, sawing, welding, and then like it goes to the finishing department. And it's the same level of data. The only thing that is missing here is on the routing, it's the work order instruction, but I could add the work order instruction actually at a comment on the routing line. So I can add comments here on the routing line, and where I could add I could bring the work order instructions into the comments of the routing line. So I would just decide to find for different place. But from a scheduling perspective, definitely a straightforward routing is much easier than a routing with all those zero time operations in there that you just use for giving work order instruction. And this is some of the things you would never recognize when you set it up without a visual scheduler, because then you have your routing, you have your work order instruction, and all is fine. And then in the minute you load it into a scheduling tool, it looks like this with all these zero operation. It is really hard to follow the structure. I mean, it's still easy here, but imagine that this would be in the middle of those production orders, and then you would see all these small steps. So I see that there is a question. Yes, I'm recording the webinar, and you can definitively have a look at this later at any time. So we will provide the link to the recording tomorrow, latest on Thursday. So this is one of the examples where, and you see, I didn't do anything with the VPS, right? I didn't schedule, I didn't do anything. I just looked at the data, and by looking at data and comparing 2 ways of setting up the same routing, I made a conclusion that overall, this might be much more straightforward, and that a good comment for, or a good place for the work instructions are not in routing steps, but would be like in the comments to the routing steps. So this is some of the things I think you easily find out by looking at it, and you should leverage this power of seeing what you're setting up with a tool like the VPS. Then the next thing is, at some point of time when you're new to Business Central, or when you have when you now go from Navision to Business Central and you have the opportunity to read or to unlearn and to relearn, then while learning Business Central, a tool like the VPS also can help a lot. And the unchanged recommendation is, while learning Business Central, focus on the master data first. So get to the more advanced settings, then implement them, make changes in the see and understand their impact with the VPS. And still, don't use the VPS for scheduling. Use it for watching and learning what is happening when you tweak things in the more advanced system. And once you've done this, then you can add on the focus the transactional data. So you can work with Business Central Manufacturing, create new production orders, change them in Business Central, change the due date, see what is happening, work with them, change routing steps, see what is happening. And again, do not use the VPS for scheduling in this phase, but use it for changing and learning Business Central Manufacturing so that you understand what is happening in the system. And again, examples here are like, what happens to the due date if I change dates on the routing lines, right? This is important to understand. And you can see this when you are on the routing lines, but it is harder to follow what is happening because you have to look at a lot of data and a lot of table. And in case you happen this, what happens to the requested delivery dates on the sales order if the production order was made from a sales order? Then you drill down further, you see something that is called planning flexibility. And you see this on firm planned production orders and on released production orders. So what does planning flexibility do? When does it have an impact? And then you will play around with planning flexibility and recognize that this is something that basically manages how a scheduler and the planning worksheet, so MPS, works together. So what happens to a released production order that was planned for tomorrow, but which we decided to start today? Like how does Business Central deal with posting output or consumption or production that was planned for tomorrow? Will it change the schedule? Will it not change the schedule? Will it make any changes? What happens? It's interesting to see actually what happens. What happens if I change an existing production order, or what happens if I change planning parameters on the item card, and what impact does this have if I refresh the production order, if I run the planning worksheet? So all of this is something that you can really visually study with tweaking things in Business Central and looking in the VPS just what happens. In Business Central, there is the Business Central by default plans with infinite capacity. So what does this mean? What does this mean if I just add production orders? What does it mean in Business Central? And then you recognize, well, if this is the case, I heard about something that is called capacity constrained resources. Does this work? How will it work? And then you can take a resource and set it, or machines, and then set it to capacity constrained resources. And then you can see what this does to your schedule and if this schedule is realistic or not. And you can also check like when this would be useful or not. And again, these are just examples where I say that the visual production schedule really helps you to learn Business Central and how Business Central works, not only when setting it up, but when working with it. And I just want to go for the demo and again, show you an example where you get really transparency on how Business Central works with the VPS. And this is what happens to release production order that was planned for tomorrow and where I post something on it. So now let's go back to my schedule. I have released production orders. They are shown to me in orange. So released production orders are in orange. Blue production orders are firm planned, and the planned production orders are these light blue ones. So now let's take this production order here, right? So basically my work date is the 17th of January 23. So this red line is the today line. And I see there is this production order here where I had the first step planned actually for last week, Friday, then it should have run today, yesterday, and a bit today. And wrong example. Well, let me and now you see that the second step in on my milling tool is planned for today and for tomorrow, and the third step on turning is scheduled for tomorrow. So it can be, and Business Central does not prevent you from this, that whatever something happened so that we have no output and no output on drilling, and now no output on milling, but on the step 3 on turning, that from my production journal I remove all those lines, and this is something that I now do manually, but depending on how your systems are set up, how disciplined your workers are, this can be that you could say, okay, I don't mind what was before, but now I'm responsible for turning, and I know that this was planned for the day after tomorrow, but you know what? I had some idle time today. I looked at this item, and this fitted very well with how the machine was set up. So I finished this step. You can post something in the middle, um, in the middle of an operation, because I'm the guy who's running the turning machine, and I said, hey, actually, I decided to finish this earlier. And now, if I reload the data to the VPS, then we recognize that this beast is finished. So I'm today on the 17th. There was something that was planned for tomorrow. I said I did it today, so I did it on the 17th, and Business Central did not change the routing. It created a capacity ledger entry for today on that machine for that production order, but the routing is unchanged. So now I'm having a schedule that tells me, oh, there is something planned for tomorrow, which is already finished. And by the way, the steps before are not yet finished. So first of all, I would now, if this would be real life, I would ask my milling guys and I would ask my drilling guys what status here is, how we could start on this and finish this before we had an output posted on this. But you still see, if you post something that is in the future, Business Central will not change your routing. And this is something you recognize from this. The good thing is, and can be seen from the histogram, from the capacity utilization chart, this doesn't consume any capacity. So you see this still here, but it does not consume capacity. And this is something like, what happens in these cases that I do this? What happens to my schedule? What happens to Business Central data? What happens to the capacity? This is something that you really nicely gain transparency when you learn Business Central with a tool like the VPS. Then, and I see there's another question. There's one question: is it possible to split one production order between two or more operators automatically to speed up processing? Well, not automatically, but you can do this with Business Central if you use concurrent capacities, I would say. And then, is it possible to start next process before fully ending previous? For example, processing 1,000 items. Is it possible to set up some batch size to send part to the next process? Yes, this is possible. In Business Central, this is called send ahead quantity. This is fully supported by our product. So this is fully supported by the VPS and the VAPS. So this is a standard functionality that says, okay, if I make 1,000 items, and if in the first step, like in my case, if of this 1,000 item I have done 100 in drilling, then I could already start to mill those hundreds while I produce the remaining 900 here on drilling. This is definitively possible. This is out-of-the-box Business Central functionality. And if you work with a product like the VPS, you understand what you will set up in your routing if you use what is called the center head quantity. So let me quickly go back to the routing that we saw before. And maybe now we go to this more simpler one. So if you want to achieve this, you would add you would add a number here. So you could set a head quantity that you would say, okay, whenever 5 pieces are done on the drilling machine, you can go on the milling machine, and if 10 are done on the milling machine, then it could go to turning. So you can this is standard master data, and if you put it in here and then create a new production order, look at it at the VPS, you will automatically see how this would work. So I hope that this answers your question. Let's go for a second back to PowerPoint. We talked about how the VPS can help and help you gain transparency when setting up Business Central. The VPS can also help you to learn Business Central, and it can help you when using Business Central, because by now you know what you see in the VPS. You also know how to interpret the data once you've worked with the VPS as a visualization tool, and you know which data changes and where in the VPS when you changed Business Central data. Just like I showed you a few examples with the routings, or I just posted randomly some output and I saw, okay, now this operation of the release production order had this underscore here, which means it's finished, and this is a reaction of what I did in Business Central. So now you really know if you change stuff, if you use Business Central, where will I see changes in the VPS? And so I really recommend you to use the visualization while you're using Business Central Manufacturing. So if you create new production or see how they are positioned in the VPS, do not use it initially for scheduling, but use it to determine how you want to use Business Central. And this is another separate. So I saw you that it can help you. I showed you that you can help it to determine how to set things up. I just showed you a couple of things, a couple of example that it showed you how to use posting, when to use posting, and what to take into account when you post output and consumption. And then it won't change your schedule, it won't change your routing. And this is really important to understand those principles, because that helps you to determine how you want to use Business Central. And examples are, when do you want to release a production order? That means, when do you want to change the status from firm, planned to released? So maybe you establish a rule because you see how it works in the visual production schedule. Once you scheduled the production order to the machine and the point of time where you want to have it within the next 2 weeks, then you release it. And that means you basically freeze this, and then you establish the rule that you will never change in the schedule a released production order unless you have some urgency. And building such rules for using Business Centrals are essential for you to gain efficiency out of Business Central, and you get the transparency on those rules that you're building by looking at them visually with the VPS. When to post shop floor completion, we just spoke about this. Will I do it only at the end of the routing step, or will I do it at the end when the production order is finished? Will I also do it in the middle, that I also see some information like this, that things are in progress and I'm running a little bit faster than expected, or that I see things like this, where we have progress, but the progress is in the past, there's no progress yesterday, so I'm running a little bit behind. So when do I want to do this? Then in Business Central, you have a quite powerful planning engine, the planning worksheet that does the material requirements planning, MRP, and it does also the master production scheduling, the MPS. So when you run the master production schedule, which is the demand-driven planning, but not a capacity-oriented planning, then which date range to set there? Which impact will have running a master production schedule? Which impact does this have on your production schedule? And which impact will the date range of your master production schedule you have. So if you run it from today, most likely you will see that some of the production orders will change, and this will be the firm planned and the planned one, because the released ones will not be touched. So you need to have this policy of releasing a production order so that that you keep a stable period. If there are firm planned production orders within the stable period that you also want to freeze, then you need to kind of figure out mechanism like how to remove the planning flexibility. All those are processes that you can have to set up for using Business Central that you really better understand with a product like the visual production scheduler. Which information can you take from Business Central reports, and which information do I find better and easier and more visual in the visual scheduler? So something like this, that you see the capacity load, you do not have to create a report from this, but you see, okay, I have an overload here somewhere on my milling machine. This is my report that tells me, okay, the overload is here. It's in week 7, I'm in week 3, so I have enough time to figure this out. So this would be information you get easily from here. And this is also something that you can figure out while you play with the product. And I didn't even start to schedule, right? So also in which cycles do I have to update my routings, like the example that I had before, that is the runtime is 6 minutes or 5 minutes. So when I recognize that I'm producing these items a couple of times last month, and it was always 7 minutes, should I update the routing to 7 minutes that the capacity utilization gets longer, or should I wait? So also this is something, while you use it, you can look at what impact this not changing the data has on your schedule, and will you see it automatically visually, because then if you don't update the routing, so if your routings, the real time is always longer than the time you have on the routing, then you get a schedule that is not realistic because you're working with too ambitious assumptions. And this is something that also your schedule will tell us. And again, it tells you visually without you doing any kind of scheduling. So now let's talk a little bit about production scheduling and where you gain transparency. And now you really know how a business central manufacturing works. You know how the VPS works. So now that you know this, you will win transparency with a visual production scheduler if you define and establish scheduling processes, so that you have a clear idea what you want to achieve when scheduling, and also when and how often you will schedule. So how will you change the timing of production? Or will you do it in Business Central, or will you do it on the routing, or will you do it in the VPS? How to change the routing of the production order, so how to assign it from one work center to the other, when to schedule on work center level and when to schedule on machine center level, how to do this, which information do I need to see when scheduling, which information that I need to see for scheduling is missing, where do I have it in Business Central, how do I get it there, how do I get it in the schedule. So this is all when you're scheduling, when you have processes on how to schedule with the system that you have set up, that you've learned and that you're using, where you have been guided by a visual scheduler, then you can think of these questions. And I would like to spend a couple of more minutes onto those, because before we then move from transparency to simplicity. So when to schedule on work center level and when to schedule on machine center level, and how to do this. Well, remember, on our routings and in the initial example that we looked at, I had this very complicated case, and I had this very straightforward case where I said, okay, these are my 5 steps in machining, and I put the routing all on machine center level. Well, if I have a shop with more or less a bunch of comparable machines, and if I have if I have established planning cycles, then I actually can do the routing on work center level. So then I can say, okay, whenever I produce this item, this should go to drilling, and then it should go to milling, turning, and then it should go to quality control. And then when you create a new production order, it will look a bit like this guy over here, right? It will be on the group level, and you can monitor, like if you have issues with the group's overall capacity and where you might have free capacity and stuff like this, and then it gives you, having it on group level first, it gives you an indication if you can get this, if and when you can get this piece of work done in a dedicated work cell. And then once you have it there and you go to find planning, then the person who is in charge of scheduling should then make the decision when and where to work on this production order. So now I have this on work center level, but I see, hey, there is actually a gap here on my drilling machine number 2. So I can take it and schedule it to here, right? And now it's here, and then the successor is automatically pushed forward. I see that my milling machine is busy at that time. My milling 2 is busy, but I have a gap here on my milling machine, and then I can schedule it from the work center to machine center, and also here quality control. I see, okay, this is actually quite busy. Maybe I can a bit squeeze it in here, and then see, okay, I have some waiting time from here to here. Maybe I can push this forward, but still, here is the due date. I'm still finalizing this right in time. Maybe I can ask for some overtime in the quality control to get this done faster if the customer pays me delivering faster. So, but the essence is, if you have, and this is something that you will learn and that you will build an understanding for while you're using the visual production scheduler as a visualization tool first to gain transparency. Then you can make decisions like this. Do I want to have the routing always on the machine center level, or do I want to have it on the work center level and have then somebody decide when and where to manufacture this? And then when I look at my schedule here, I actually see meaningless information. I see meaningless information on the first level. So I look at this and it tells me number 10, number 40, and this is the number of the routing step, and the number of the routing step is meaningless. But I would like to be, I'm interested in which item should I produce here and what is the quantity. So I can actually start to design my scheduling experience for me by customizing this view. So I can define what I see at first glance, and I can do this in the setup of the VPS. And there I can say, hey, I want to actually configure the label. And I'm in the capacity view, so I want to configure the operation, the capacity view. It shows me right now the operation number, and this is quite meaningless information, but I want to see from the production order line table, I want to see which item I'm producing, and I want to see the item number. And next to the item number, maybe I want to see another information. I want to see the item number, maybe some blank. I want to see, and then a second information there, divided by space and a vertical line and another space. Let me just quickly do this. Another space, and then I want to see the quantity, right? And the quantity is also information I get from the production order line. I want to see the quantity, and this is information that is important for me to see it on the first glance. So now I did this, I say close. And I got the information on the first glance. So now for every production order here, see what is the item and what is the quantity. And if this is small, then I just see the item or the beginning of the item number, but I want to see details. If I'm drilling down into the day, I see for every production order, not only the item number and the quantity, but I also see, like here, and I switched this on earlier, the gray part is the setup time and this is the runtime. I can also hide the setup time, then I will just see the bar in total without the setup time. like you see it here. So I can really decide which granularity, let me show the setup time again because I like seeing the setup times. So this is information I see on the first glance. On the second glance, you see if I hover with the mouse over here, I get additional information. This is something that I can configure. And then on the third, and I can configure it in the same way like I configured the text here on this bar. And the third information, or the third glance is information. I do a double click, I see on the production order card, and this also can get customized, or you or your partner add additional information to this quite easy, so that while scheduling with the VPS and understanding Business Central, both the master data and the transactional data, how it works, you can really define your scheduling experience to gain more transparency faster. And with this, for the second last time back to PowerPoint, this is what I just showed you right now. And we did the demo already. So now we talked a lot about transparency, and that with just a visual tool, you get better transparency when setting up Business Central Manufacturing, when learning Business Central Manufacturing, and when using Business Central Manufacturing. And then I showed you just a few examples of how you can gain additional transparency while scheduling. And now let's talk for the last couple of minutes of this webinar also on simplicity. And the positive side effect of transparency already is simplicity. If things are transparent, they always are easier, right? Transparency makes setting up Business Central, learning Business Central, and using Business Central simpler. And as the transparency is brought to you by a visual scheduler, it also makes scheduling simpler. You see Business Central Manufacturing visually, and you schedule by drag and drop. You see the impact that has on your machine center, you see the impact that has on work centers, you see the impact that this has on other production orders. So everything becomes transparent, and with the transparency, you already gain simplicity. And if you want to add to this simplicity, if you want to gain more transparency, then, and this is always the case, if you want to make things simpler, then you have to look for things that you can automate, right? Everything that you can define and structure into processes that you can automate can get simplified, right? If you look at your overall business processes, the area for process improvement and process simplification is always there, where you can make things repeatable and where you can structure them in a way that you can automate them. And if you're using the VPS, as I have shown you right now, just with a very few examples, if you've used the VPS to set up Business Central, or to help you setting up Business Central Manufacturing, to learn Business Central Manufacturing, to use Business Central Manufacturing, and if you use the VPS also for scheduling, then you will have identified by then areas where you can actually automate parts of your scheduling processes. And so why not simplifying your scheduling processes? An example where you can automate processes that are so far manual is add new production orders to the schedule, ideally taking into account the current capacity utilization as the final capacity. Or what I just did before, if you do the routing on the work centers, and then I did the drag and drop to the machine centers, this is something that you can automate. You can define rules and then you can automate it. Or you can say, hey, I want to build a new schedule with all open production orders starting next week. This is something that can get automated. Or you can say, hey, actually, I want to look at my schedule and please calculate it new for me in a way that I reduce the WIP by reducing the idle times on certain work and machine centers. This can get automated. Or you can say, hey, actually, I had production orders planned for yesterday, like the one we had here, like this one. This one was planned, release production order. This guy here, this release production was planned for yesterday. There is no booking on here. So, and if I ask my shop floor guys, and if they confirm to me, well, no, we missed it. We didn't find time to work on it. The machine broke or whatever. we were a little bit lazy, we had too long cigarette breaks, whatever. If they tell me they didn't work on this, what was left over from yesterday or the day before yesterday has to get scheduled again. And also this is something that you can automate. And this is something that our product, the VAPS, can help you with. And I will very quickly show you an example how you can actually automate adding new production orders to the schedule, ideally take into account the current capacity utilization. And with this, I'm going to the last demo for today. And now we will look at the VAPS and not the VPS. So I leave the VPS, and now we are going to automate some scheduling processes. And first of all, we want to add some production orders to the schedule, and I will do it from a sales order. So I prepared a sales order here where I got a couple of items that I all don't have right now in a sufficient quantity. I need them by mid-March. And so I actually say, hey, you know what? I want to plan the production orders for this sales order. I want to create new production orders. I want to create them as firm plan production orders. I want to create them as item orders. So now I'm creating here, I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I created 8 new production orders. And now I'm the scheduler. I have to schedule those 8 new production orders, and I want to do it in an automated way. I don't want to do drag and drop. I just want to add them to the schedule by some automated intelligent scheduling procedures. So with the VAPS, I would create a new simulation. A simulation is a snapshot of my schedule so that I can actually do multiple schedules and compare them. And now that the simulation is created, I will view the simulation. And I see I have the same schedule as before because we're integrating VAPS, and VPS integrates with the same data before. And you see I have my rock solid schedule here on my drilling machines, on my milling machines, on my sawing, on my welding machines, and so on and so on. And I then have all those production orders here that are on this standby resource. These are the production orders that I just created, and I want to automatically add them to the schedule without looking without doing drag and drop for all these things. And then I can say add schedule. I want to add them all, and this is a VAPS functionality. I can define allowed alternative machine centers. So I want to look within all allowed machine centers, which is the earliest that have capacity. And now I've added those production orders to the schedule automatically. I have a new schedule for the production order that I just created from the sales order. And by the way, I now can go to what we call the sales order view, look at my sales order 10 to 23 and tell the customer when his items are finished based on my current schedule. So this is really taking the transparency you get from the VPS, turning them transparency into scheduling processes, and then starting to automate these processes. This brings you simplicity. And so in this webinar, I showed you a couple of examples how you as a manufacturer can leverage on transparency and simplicity with visual scheduling and Business Central. And the main point is visual scheduling. This word consists, or this expression consists of 2 words, and this is visual and scheduling. And I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to visualize, because the visualization makes things transparent. And the earlier you visualize, the earlier you gain transparency. So if you use just the visualization part of a product like the VPS for setting up Business Central and for learning Business Central and for initially using Business Central, then you will gain a lot of transparency, a lot of understanding, and you will leverage on this because your setup of Business Central will be smarter, your learning will be faster, and you will use it from the beginning more efficiently because you have a transparent understanding what is happening. And then you start with scheduling. And once scheduling is in place and once scheduling routines are in place, then you actually can simplify it by adding more scheduling sophistication, and this will allow you to automate things. And with this, I'm done with what I prepared for today. I got some questions that I answered. If you have more questions, you can answer them now, or you can send them to me via email or on LinkedIn. I would like to thank you for your attention. I would like to thank you for participating in this webinar. And again, if you have a question, please let me know. I'm really happy to engage with all of you, although you're on mute now, but this is just due to the organizational needs of running a webinar. So I think I spoke enough to wait or give you time to post a question. So there seems to be no more question right now. So thanks again. This webinar was recorded and we will provide the recording and upload the recording on our YouTube channel and website tomorrow, latest the day after tomorrow, and we will notify by email. And with this, bye-bye and see you later in one of the next webinars. Thank you.